Hi to everybody. I'm very welcome to this group. My name is Birgit Kuna. I work at the German Aerospace Center and I'm specialized in the field of climate change and health. And it's a pleasure to me to announce that we have here 4 parties today who share their experiences in the form of case studies at the beginning of our session. And after that, you will have a chance to share your experiences in the breakout groups. But before we start to go into the case studies, I would like to explain a little bit what we thought about the different knowledge systems that are addressed here in this session. So we have written local, indigenous, and scientific knowledge systems. So what do we mean? So we tried a distinction. Could you give the next slide, please? So what do we understand under the term of local knowledge? Local knowledge is the accumulation of knowledge that people acquire by interacting with their surroundings. That can be people, landscape, culture, etc. It is defined by good knowledge of what's going on in the surroundings and also, for instance, what kind of plants grow in that specific regions or other characteristics of that location. And local knowledge is based on experience of the people who live in this area. The next step, please. What do we understand of indigenous knowledge? We used indigenous or traditional knowledge kind of in the same way in the session. So indigenous traditional knowledge is that part of local knowledge that is passed down through generations over longer periods of time. And that is in contrast to the local knowledge that is derived from contemporary experiences. But as local knowledge, indigenous knowledge is also based on experience of the people. Scientific knowledge science is a pursuit of knowledge and application of knowledge of the natural and social world that is following a systematic methodology. So in contrast to the other two, scientific knowledge is based on evidence, based on data, and based on analysis. So we ask you to keep these kind of distinctions in your mind as we move on, because they will be also part of the discussion later on in the breakout groups. I want to give you here already the questions for the breakout groups so that you already tuned in a little bit. What do we want to discuss in the smaller groups where everybody, I hope, will have a chance to share knowledge and experience. So we have chosen the questions: what can local, traditional, or scientific knowledge contribute to food security, nature-based solutions? And what are the limitations of these different knowledge systems? What do you see? What is your experience? Please share later in the group. So let's start with the case studies, and it's my very pleasure to introduce Pascal Johosu from the Hunger Project and the movement from Community-Led Development. The floor is yours, Pascal. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigitte. Thank you all. And thank you for offering this opportunity to share with you this experience about how to promote local, high nutrient vegetable for better nutrition, health, and economic status during COVID-19 time. We are sharing the case of the Bo community valuing Cleome ginandra, which is a plant with a high nutrient component. I'm sharing this experience from the ground through the hunger projects, and the hunger project is sharing this experience through the community-led development. Next slide, please. I have just talked about the movement for community-led development. This is a global movement which has been launched in 2015, and up to date, the movement comprises more than 1,500 local civil society organizations and 72 international non-governmental organizations. It works through national chapter in working groups, and we have chapter indeed in Benin. The whole purpose is how to build local development and make sure that we build the resilience for community. And the background of this project is this. Benin Movement for Community-Led Development chapter has emphasized well-being during the pandemic through specially developed communication tools. And those tools focus on nutrition. And you can see the poster there. They mention especially adequate sleep, right? The last image you can see. Focus also on physical exercises. Third aspect, avoid stress. But the top you can see, we focus on good nutrition, particularly during this COVID-19 time. Next slide, please. Yet, when we emphasize on nutrition, with such emphasis on nutrition, we come to see how to strengthen food security by building on local asset knowledge, so that the Benin chapter, for that Benin chapter has identified the case of the Dugbo community. And you can see Cléomé-Ginandra is well known as a local vegetable with high nutrient component, and the cultivation for the Cléomé-Ginandra cultivation is for local consumption, only with little contribution to economic development of the community. Next slide, please. What is the transformative idea here? The transformative idea is to make available a series of superfoods, including Cléomé-Ginandra, to local and urban consumers. Indeed, we can see that transformative change that value local resources and knowledge is needed for producers and all stakeholders involved to ensure a sustainable, just, and equitable food system. What entails in it? What it entails? It really entails community knowledge. Here from 10 villages of Dugbo, we focus on local vegetable. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. It really entails on local community knowledge, here from 10 village of Dugbo. And we mention 3 aspects here. The local vegetable itself, that is known, Cléomé-Ginandra, with local knowledge around it. And the second aspect, we focus on local recipes with Cléomé-Ginandra to be really collected. How people locally collected, process it, we know it, and we collect all information around it. And the third aspect is the assessment of local economy development around Cléomé-Ginandra, Here we talk about the markets, the actors involved, and so on, the profit made from it locally, and so on. Next slide, please. We can see here, before, just in the previous one, actors involved in promoting Cleome-Ginendra. Those are stakeholders, farmers from the communities. 3 pillars for transformation. Here we mention local knowledge, including culinary expertise. Those involve local recipes adapted to urban taste buds and restaurants with chef. The process of agricultural transformation, and we talk also about the model mindsets for transformative change. And also, as I mentioned, developing local cultivation itinerary to be improved locally. Scientific expertise in the second pillar. There we focus on the input for improvement of local cultivations. Particularly, we mention here the diet quality, that is the information to be made available by scientists on the nutrient value of the Cleome-Ginendra, and superfood series that will be processed from based on Cleome-Ginendra. And the third pillar is about collaboration for transformation. There we see that farmers, private sector, governments, and civil society need to be really involved, and such involvement could really make sure that we develop a market or markets such that the Cleome-Ginendra value chain is profitable for all. And let's see now the recipe for transformative economic change. Key ingredients that fuel in that recipe: private sector, entrepreneurs, chef, all stakeholders from the government. Second, third aspect is civil society. Let's see the procedure. Civil society gathers local know-how, scientists nutrient information, and provide support for the overall process. Second, government provide resources and regulation procedure. 3, entrepreneurs and chef improve local recipes. And 4th, all of them collaboratively organize tasting session for local superfoods at nutrient events such as Carnival. Next slide, please. Let's see the challenge ahead. We will be mentioned first, raising collective commitment to valuing local vegetable, recognizing that they have immense cultural and consumer significances. They provide nutritious and healthy food options. They improve resilience to climate change, and they are well adapted to the local landscape and climate. The second is securing government commitment towards the resources needed to create sustainable partnership based on justice and equity. Before closing, I would mention that this is a pilot and partnership with Nutrition Association, Nutrition Society of Benin has revealed that many other vegetables with high value of nutrient component are available and we could be processed in superfoods. We invite funders and others to join so that we could scale up the initiative. Last slide, please. Thank you all, and please take care during this time of COVID-19. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, this is my presentation. Thank you. And now I will pass it over to Manila Karel. She is from Practical Action. Manila, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Pascal. Hello, everyone. I am Manila Kharel. I work as thematic lead for sustainable agriculture and markets in Practical Action, based in Nepal office. Today, I am presenting you a case of locally led climate adaptation approach through climate field schools and how it is helping farmers to grow more food in the face of climate change. I personally have participated in many climate field schools run by communities, and I'm truly inspired by the impacts of these schools on agriculture production in rural areas of Nepal. Farmer field schools in Nepal are fundamental for successful adaptation to climate change, giving farmers and communities the opportunities to blend their local and indigenous knowledge with scientific knowledge. These farmer field schools, which are supported by practical action, enable farmers to learn by doing through experimentation, observation, and learning together. Next slide. Talking about agriculture systems in Nepal, it is predominantly rain-fed. That brings huge challenges to farmers who are impacted by climate change and weather variability. The increased incidence of drought, flood, high temperature, erratic rainfall, pest and diseases, hot and cold waves, and depleting water sources are affecting agriculture productivity and livelihoods of smallholder farmers in Nepal. Yet, the majority of rural smallholder farmers are not aware of climate change. They regard climate change simply as God's will, and because of this, farmers are bearing crop failure and huge losses. I have heard this problem firsthand when I met Kaushali Devikuar from Assam district. She simply told me, if we worship God, we will get rain. This low production in the remote hills and mountains of Nepal is causing food insecurity and affecting livelihood of farmers and has propelled migration. Next slide. To address the impacts of climate change, climate field schools provide a research and learning platform for farmers. They evolved from farmer field school, which have a long history in Nepal, led by government and non-government agencies, to help farmers improve integrated pest and disease management. Following the original extension model, Practical Action integrated the climate change component in farmer field schools. Climate Field School help farmers assess the impact of climate change in their local farming system by using communities' local knowledge and relating it with nature. For example, the emergence of some weeds provides evidences for soil becoming drier. In climate field schools, farmers can experiment with climate resilient varieties, technologies, and farming practices that enable them to cope with the changing climate. They can access, interpret, and utilize climate information and agro advisory services for undertaking choices and decisions for farming operations. Business skills and markets are another crucial consideration in climate field schools. Farmers are equipped with simple cost benefit analysis, market demands, and digital market information that help them to plan for market oriented production. Women have a greater role to play in agriculture in Nepal because of the feminization of agriculture. Due to discriminatory sociocultural norms and beliefs, women have mobility restrictions, limited access to extension services, and linkage with market actors. Climate Field School means women are empowered with leadership skills, peer support, and networking and linkage with market actors and government services. Next slide. As we can see in the pictures, farmers at the school learn to use a range of equipment and technology, such as hygrometer to test soil moisture, plastic houses with raised beds and good drainage systems to avoid damage caused by waterlogging at times of heavy rainfall, and extreme cold, use of cover crops and crop residues, balanced use of farmyard manure and fertilizers for soil fertility, and organic matter gains, efficient water management technologies such as drip irrigation. Next slide. Climate field schools improve local agriculture knowledge systems by blending local, indigenous, and scientific knowledge, also by combining climate and market information. The other advantages are they help farmers improve both productivity and resilience, and therefore improve farming as a private sector activity. That is, farming practices and farm planning linked to both climate information, management of natural resources, and the market. One important area of overlap between climate and market knowledge is in the crops and varieties grown, such as neglected or underutilized species, or farmers' varieties, often cope with droughts or climate change better than commercially improved varieties and can have high value in the market. And since those species and varieties come from farmers themselves, they have access and cost advantages, providing quality of those seeds can be assured. Climate field schools are therefore a way to strengthen and improve farmer managed systems. And as productivity and income increases, fewer people see the need to leave rural areas or go abroad to work. Climate field schools build the social capital, skills, and confidence of women, which empowers them to play more roles in the leadership and development of their households and communities. I met Rammaya Rukhaya, which from Highland of Mugu district. I met her actually after completing climate field schools. And she told me, despite social stigma, I took the challenge of becoming a leader farmer in climate field schools. And now I am proud to say that I earn more money from vegetable farming and I am living a happy and dignified life. And that's all we wanted to listen. Next slide. So, besides all these advantages, it's obvious that the sustainability of climate field schools is challenging. We need to work out who should take over ownership from practical action and how can we invest in knowledge systems and build the capacity of farmers and other stakeholders to continue to enable farmers to produce more food. Thank you everyone for listening to me. Now I would like to hand over the floor to the next speaker, Joan Namuleme from Makerere University, Kampala, and she is presenting on the use of climate information to enhance food security among urban farmers in Kasa district in Uganda. Joan, floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Manila. As she has told you, I'm Joan Namleme from Uganda, and I'm going to present about use of climate information to enhance food security. Please. Next, my case study is in Kasasa district, which is in the west of the country, and it's mainly about arable farmers who are growing crops like cassava, beans, sweet potatoes, yams, coffee, and bananas. This district faces impacts of climate change such as floods and droughts. Next slide, please.
So I think we are.
Connect information system
We just lost you for a second.
They have two choices.
Joan, you're breaking up. Maybe try to switch off your camera in case it's switched on. I can't see that as I'm sharing my screen.
They usually use scientific forecasts and ignore the. Okay, thank you. Next slide.
Yeah, coming up.
The indigenous forecasts usually these are forecasts that are passed on from generation to generation. Farmers in Kasese district, they usually identify the start of the rain by using indigenous forecasts. For example, when it's going to start raining, go from west to east. Also, the area when the rains are going to start. Has been weakened due to the climate variability in the district. Next slide, please.
Joan, are you there?
In the district, scientific forecasts usually are disseminated produced in the district, and they are not very commonly used since they can trust more of their indigenous knowledge. The challenges of forecasts are poor spatial resolution and temporal resolution. And also sometimes these forecasts fail to provide information about the onset of the rain, and also farmers, the inaccuracy from the scientific forecast, farmers usually usually have less tolerance to that inaccuracy. In conclusion, use of both scientific and indigenous forecasts is important for farmers to face climate change impacts. Thank you very much for listening to me. I would like to pass on to Bajit Kuna to take us through the next session.
Thank you very much, Joan. I think it was very hard for our last presenter, Joan, to get the message through. The connection was not very good. But still, there was a lot of text on the slides, so we can be happy that we could read while the connection was bad. We could read the slides and try to understand the intention. Thank you very much, Joan. Thank you very much, Pascal and Menila, for introducing these very inspiring case studies. So now is the time to have the breakout groups so that you all have a say and can share your experiences and also what you think about aspects of the presentations and things that might have been new for you or give thought for food. So we will have 40 minutes time for these breakout groups, and you will be randomly allocated to one of the groups. And we do have already rapporteurs who will take notes with shared screens, so we can all watch what they write. And after the 40 minutes, after exactly 40 minutes, the breakout groups will automatically dissolve and the people will be transferred automatically back to the plenary. So we have to keep a little bit an eye on the time so that we're not surprised when we're taken over to another room. We have to see how many groups we want to have. Maybe Alex, what do you think? We have, I think, 25 people, so it would be then 3 groups possible. I
we're
assume.
gonna do 3 groups.
Okay. So we will have I think then Pascal's. I'm not sure. Maybe we should use the Pascal or.
The groups were already allocated. So
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, so I think we can be transferred to the rooms and have the start the discussion there. Have great fun in the groups. Thank you. Thank you very much for the thoughts and the breakout groups, for the sharing. And yes, we have a little time now in the plenary to share maybe some of the ideas you found interesting in the discussion in the breakout groups. So yeah, I'm not sure how the numbering of the rooms are still. I mean, I could start. Is that our slide, Paola? Or is
Yes, it is. I also included here the most important discussion on limitations.
Yeah. Right. So I asked in my group, but it was kind of overwhelming, and so I think I presented myself a little bit, our discussion. So we were actually, directly at this interface of how to involve the local communities. And I think one of the points is that to me, it was interesting, maybe to the others as well, that the knowledge systems and how we use them in a local community and how it's fed back to science, for instance, all this use of knowledge systems has a very political dimension to it. So that also means we have to be very careful when we think about how to combine the knowledge systems at the level of the local communities. And we had indigenous, good to make use of different knowledge systems. I mean, that has been recognized, I think, in our discussions. That is good to use these different approaches, especially in the face of climate change, where knowledge systems break down sometimes, or changes cannot be easily understood. So it's good to have different approaches to these changes. What else do we have? Discussion on how to integrate the 3 knowledge systems. Yeah, that is what we had. Yeah, you see on the table different aspects. The knowledge of the farmers about the ecosystems was another part of the discussion. I mean, the knowledge of the farmers that is also based on analysis and collection of data, in a sense. I mean, that was really interesting in our group. I thought that, we had presented at the beginning, said the science, based on data and analysis, but maybe that's not really, it's a little bit too rough to say it like this, because people who work on the land, they also, have analysis and, their data, how much they get from certain farming methods. So I thought that was also interesting, that we have to be careful with the wording, what we put to different knowledge systems, specifics. We try to hang on to different systems. Yeah, I'm not sure if I grasped the main points, but you may add, but we can also hand over to the next group at this point, which is group 2.
Yeah. Yes, the group
Yeah.
2.
It's coming
Yes,
up.
no, Alexandra, please move
one
ahead.
second. Yeah, here it is.
Thanks, Alexandra. So we had a very rich discussion in terms of, we spent a lot of time discussing what the contributions was, and some were already mentioned by, Breakout, which we also talked about, which is how that local knowledge systems and indigenous knowledge system are wisdom that has been accumulated over the years, and they are adapted to the local conditions. So, in that sense, they are resilient, they are adaptable. There's something that people have familiarity with, and they also have access to, so they're much more readily available. It also does two other dimensions that we discussed, was the gender dimension, in terms of, women often being the smallholder farmers and custodians of knowledge, and the fact that when you value local and indigenous systems, there is a sense of pride it generates in the local communities and amongst the people about their own knowledge. We looked at a very interesting example from Zimbabwe on the Seed Sovereignty Program and Agroecology Alliance, again trying to capture these different aspects of local and indigenous knowledge and its value. We also looked at the fact that because indigenous and local knowledge is getting lost, it's difficult to preserve, or hasn't been preserved. There is a danger of it getting lost today. The need to scientifically document it. Scientific knowledge can contribute in a number of ways. One is by documenting these practices to ensure that they are preserved, this knowledge and wisdom is preserved. Second is validating it, actually, right? By doing systematic studies, which can be taken as credible proof. Also looking at what works and why, and what doesn't work by the same logic. The nutrient value of different foods, right? The local crops which are being developed. So what is the nutrient value of that? And finally, what kind of adaptations are needed in today's rapidly changing climate and environment for local farmers, so scientific knowledge can contribute that thing through, for instance, forecasts, right? And there are examples in different countries of that happening, of that knowledge being provided to local farmers. So that's what we discussed in terms of contribution. In terms of limitations, if we go to the next slide. Okay, so again, some of the limitations were mentioned, but in terms of local and indigenous knowledge, the limitations that we looked at was the lack of kind of that collaboration or link to research institutions, both to kind of document, preserve this knowledge or validate this knowledge, but also so that to know more about what's happening in the world outside and to be able to learn from and use the current technologies. The second thing that we looked at was really that sometimes local and traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge is based on beliefs, which, as Breakout said, could be, is actually somebody's analysis, even if it's not a systematic analysis, people know. But oftentimes it's also it's a belief that can be passed on from generations. And so it needs to be validated for a lot of, say, the people who are, as people gain education, they want a little more scientific proof, and that credibility is kind of not there because if it's not systematically documented. And sometimes it may also, and so it will be difficult to convince, say, policymakers to use it. It could also be discriminatory against women, for instance, if it is in a society which is highly patriarchal. So those were the local and indigenous systems limitations. For scientific limitations of scientific knowledge, we talked about the need to translate it, the fact that it has to be easily understood, easily accessible in the language that people understand, which is not often the case. We talked about the barriers to access for local communities to scientific knowledge. So, how do you actually put scientific knowledge to use? People need to know it, but there may be technological barriers, there may be price barriers or understanding barriers, the lack of resources. So government needs to perhaps step in with resources to kind of enable that translation and documentation. I think that's what we discussed. Please step in if I missed anything, Alexandra or anyone from the group.
I think that was perfect. Thanks, Gunjan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, then we go to the third group.
Yeah, thank you. We also had a very, very fruitful discussion. Time was really very short. Could have gone on for a bit longer, I'm sure. We highlighted some points here as key takeaways from our discussion. We started first pointing out the value of local knowledge. And you look at great examples from Nepal about the different contributions actually to society that local knowledge and traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge actually provides, like crop varieties and so on. And then actually Stella had a great example on the communication and knowledge exchange from Kenya. Stella, do you want to quickly elaborate?
Yeah, I can do that. So with the radio, I think this was given in an earlier example from Uganda. So this is the main mode of communication when you're trying to reach these remote communities, and it's very limiting. So it just points to the information and communication gaps that we have. And then someone else mentioned the two-way, if there was two-way communication, because if you're only able to reach them through radio, are they able to then feed back into this knowledge system? And somebody else mentioned the apps, which those have their own limitation in the sense that people at the grassroots might not have access to smartphones. I hope I've covered everything. Mm-hmm. Back to you.
So that is the different contributions of local knowledge, but also its own limitation on how can this knowledge or knowledge itself be transferred throughout communities. We then quite rapidly went into actually already the scientific knowledge system, and as Birgit, as you also mentioned, the problems around the definition, what is scientific, and how can we actually compare knowledge systems to each other, and isn't scientific knowledge just our local knowledge built or that went through a transformation into very highly quantified empirical data that is now difficult to communicate. And Petra had a few very interesting points on that as well.
Now I found my mouse. So yes, we I was more on the scientific part, mainly my comments. And apart from the comments the other groups already made, I think I would only like to highlight on on science sometimes not being fully practical. So the results from scientific studies might not always 100% work in the field, and then it's always a question: how can these results then translate back into science? So there's sometimes a bit of a disconnect between, which is a limitation between kind of the local indigenous, if you want to call it like this, knowledge on the ground, and then the scientific quantification and validation. So I think really the science needs to first be aware, be a bit careful not to tell people what they already know, which as well sometimes happens, but really kind of try to help on the ground, and then kind of allow the connection back from the experience on the ground and incorporate this in updating their science actually. So this was one of our important points, that science actually really needs to acknowledge local realities, and as well another point that that Stella, an interesting point Stella made, if I may add, towards, because it was my question how the scientific and the indigenous forecasts actually differ, like for the weather forecast for the next days or weeks, because this came up in the presentation from Uganda. And she said that actually here it would be a very important step for scientific knowledge to come in for the longer run, for the more data-based information could really help to show how climate change will actually change in the long run the farming systems and what adaptation measures are needed here. So this was maybe not a limitation, but actually a possibility where science really can step in. Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, I think to summarize, a lot of I think most of our key takeaways is probably the communication itself between, or knowledge communication and communication between the knowledge system, how that is possible. Also a point on the limitations that we have made, which I really liked, is that knowledge systems are now working in changing conditions, and we simply do not know what we don't know at the moment. We cannot measure it, and we have to be careful also as scientific, also in the scientific community, that we're not too sure that we are measuring the right things when we don't even know that these are the things that need to be measured. Yeah, I think, Chris, do you want to add something? Anyone from the group want to add something? Otherwise, we can conclude here, I think.
I'm happy with the discussion. I still think we have a huge challenge to find better tools and modalities for using knowledge more effectively. We've got limited tools and modalities at the moment. We need to work on them. The farmer field schools in Nepal, participatory plant breeding and action research. I think we need mechanisms, more mechanisms to combine knowledge, I think, for effective community-based adaptation.
Thank you very much to the whole group. I think what Chris just said, that is how we get there, how we get to combine these systems. That's really the point. I think we have a few more minutes. I just don't want to limit here the area of discussion. Just let us know, if somebody wants to say something about the takeaway, a special idea that you have not known before that you find very important, or some ideas that you're having. I see it's something in the chat coming up. So you just raise your hands and you can comment on what you just heard of the main points from the 3 discussion groups. Yeah, so we have in the chat, we have the question from Alex, where you can also share your thoughts in the what are your main takeaways and what was new to you. So is there anybody, does anybody want to contribute on these points here?
There were some wonderful sound bites. I thought this one about the point about external knowledge and the whole definition of what's scientific knowledge, and there's one that a lot of local knowledge is scientific. It's just that it's not been sort of categorized as such. And the other one that Jonathan just said, that a lot of what we call scientific knowledge is just how we've documented our local knowledge. I thought that was kind of funny. So I think we need to listen to the recording perhaps and catch some of these sound bites in what we probably, in answering these two questions you've put in the chat box. I think you have some there.
Thank you very much. Anybody else still motivated to say something in a bigger group? No? Yeah, I think we're at the end of the session anyway. So I hand over to Joan for the final words of this session.
Group photo?
Group photo. What's about the group photo?
Everybody, and then whoever's facilitating can do some screenshots.
Yeah, I think that Joan wanted to let us know about switching our cameras on. Not sure whether her internet connection is strong enough. Joan, can you say something? Yeah, I think she's struggling with the internet connection. Oh, okay. Here you are. Good. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone who participated in our session. Thank you for sharing your ideas and experiences. Thank you very much, everyone who has participated in our session. Thank you for the ideas and experiences you've shared amongst each other. Please be reminded that our session documentation and recording will be available shortly at your page. Please come in and contribute to the greater cause of climate change adaptation.
Well, Jonah, it's hard for her to get really the better connection. But what you also wanted to say is if all of us could now switch on the our videos, so that the screenshot could be taken. So if you don't mind, please let's try that everybody gets a video on so that we see each other and I think Alex can take a screenshot from this session. Thank you.
Yeah, there's some nice photos coming out here of my screenshots. Everybody is looking very happy. Good. Okay, one more. All right. Brilliant.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a stimulating session. I'm really pleased we did it.